Welcome to That 30 Show, a podcast where we talk about the good, the bad, and the surprising parts of our 30s. I'm G, and I'm finally 30. I'm excited to find out if 30 really is the new 20, because if it is, then the best years are yet to come.
And I'm David. I'm entering my mid-30s. I used to have no back pain or trouble sleeping, but now I live off a healthy diet of self-help books and dream of being in bed by 10 p.m. every night. Join us each week as we try to figure out together what life in your 30s is all about. So welcome back to That 30 Show. For those who are wondering, G is taking one more week to recover from her vacation, but that's okay. Don't panic, everyone. It's not just going to be me this week. I have on, honestly, one of my best friends. How long have we known each other, Preet?
We've known of each other, I think, since 2015. Maybe we became friends like that summer of 2015, I think.
Ooh, summer of 2015. Sounds like a soundtrack or something.
Could be.
But I don't know. Preet, did you have a chance to listen to my last episode? The one where I went on and on about
your concussion?
Horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I remember every episode.
Did? Okay. So remember I talked about my concussion diary?
Yeah.
So there's actually an entry or two here where I mention you, and I thought I would start sharing to our small audience here a bit about who you are and our friendship by referencing that, because I don't think you know. I haven't mentioned this to you either. All right, November 22nd, 2018. Mm-hmm. The highlight of that day I wrote down was going to Black and Blue for the first time, albeit just for happy hour.
Oh my gosh.
What do you remember about that?
So interesting, because I was just thinking about this last night because I knew we were talking today, and I was kind of thinking about my story, going through my journal, and reflecting back on life. And that dinner or that happy hour at Black and Blue was a significant part of my story, or I think it started my healing journey. And I had been you asked me how I was doing, and I had been telling you, how I was doing. And I kind of moved on to the hummus and the cucumbers and moved on with life, right? And the way you reacted or responded to what I had to say, you were the first person that was like, Preet, I think you might be depressed. Do you remember that?
I remember that we were both fucking struggling with life at that point. I don't remember saying that line per se, but I do remember because I was just coming from one of my, I think, counselor sessions where my counselor was like, you have depression. I'm like, are you sure? They're like, yes, here are your symptoms. And I'm like, okay, thank you. To answer your question, I'll share my next line in my diary, which is what I was grateful for or happy about. And then I wrote down here, I'm grateful I found a friend like Preet during these times when I can share my mental health woes and understand me.
Oh.
I felt safe to share that with you because I know that you were, also, as you just mentioned, perhaps struggling a little bit at that time in life. And it was a nice moment. Because it's hard, right? I think it's so hard. It takes a lot of courage for people to share with someone your struggles, whether it's mental health or anything else, or even if you're lost your job, right? And then you're talking to someone who's gainfully employed. Yeah. And it feels a bit embarrassing because the other person's like, well, it sucks to be you. I mean, obviously, if you have a good friend, then I think that. But you always feel vulnerable in sharing something that the other person may not be able to relate to. Yeah, so that was something I saw in my diary that I thought, hey, I should mention that but we're not actually, I mean, we can go into that as much as you want, Preet, in terms of your story today. But one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on, Preet, and this, we chat about this, is because you've had the most eclectic, I don't know, a smorgasbord of career experiences. Yeah. You have this deep experience with policy, obviously, policy analysis, especially from a sort of an indigenous or First Nations informed lens. And then you went from that, from governments and policy analysis, indigenous work, to having a stint in the music industry where you that's a huge part of your life. You love music. You're super passionate about it. You're working with producers and something at one point. And then you also had a stint in with a political party. You don't have to mention any specifics, but you had a political life at one point. And then you started your own company as a consultant. And then you worked for nonprofits. You worked for the CPA Association. So one of the things that I was talking to a friend about, like her feedback on the podcast, and she's like, well, one of the things that's really relevant for people in your 30s is career, because your 30s is kind of the last decade that you can potentially still restart your career, and it's not too late to do it. In terms of maybe if you're having kids or settling down, you have less ability to take risks. This is really the last decade potentially, or maybe some people will already feel it is already too late. But certainly this idea that, oh, can I still be bold to restart my career, to change my job, to change my path, to try something new? And you have tried something new time and time again. And I think that's such an interesting story. So hopefully we can learn more about that today.
Sure, yeah. That just like stressed me out hearing all that.
Really? Why? Just reminding you of your crazy...
It sounds kind of cool. Like, I've got this experience and this, that, and the other. But like, wow, life was really chaotic for a really, really long time. So I'm a much more relaxed and peaceful person who doesn't really focus much on career these days. And so to be reminded of the person that I used to be, like, I don't know, it's a little off-putting in some ways.
That's so interesting that you're saying now that, oh, you're someone who doesn't really focus on career as much. I think I kind of know that, but I don't. I think it's a reminder for me because, a big part of my impression and perception of you throughout these years is this like career alpha female, like going for job after job, trying to get better jobs, or I don't know. We'll dig into that a bit. But yeah, I was gonna share a bit about like who you are as a person, as a friend. Yeah. I mentioned like you're a huge music person. You love concerts. I think we'll get into this, but you recently moved to Toronto, and I feel like you're going to a concert like every 2 weeks or something.
At least once a month.
At least once a month. That's a lot. Yeah. What artists have you recently gone to and are seeing in the next half year or so?
Well, I got to Toronto in February. The first concert then was Dylan Sinclair. He's an R&B singer from Toronto. Not a huge name yet, but I think is definitely getting there. March, I saw Ari Lennox, again, R&B soul.
Yeah.
April.
See a pattern.
April, I saw Division, again, R&B. April, May, I'm seeing Adria Kane. She's, again, another local Toronto artist. She's amazing. Like, somebody YouTube her, like, if you're listening, she's just amazing. June, I am seeing John Vinyl. He's another local Toronto artist.
Well, you know a lot of local, like, indie artists.
Yeah, I used to.
I guess you take the time to discover people somehow. Like, you don't just listen to the top hits, obviously.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time just, learning and looking and digging for new music. So yeah, that's in June, and then July is Beyonce.
Oh, and wait, I gotta ask, how much did that?
$358. And it's a lot.
I need at least 5 minutes to recover from that.
I know, like, it's a lot, but it's Beyonce. And so I wasn't really thinking, like, I got it, like, getting concert tickets these days is really, really difficult. Even get into the queue and then be able to, like, look through tickets and pick tickets. I clicked on the cheapest ones right away. I didn't even think about the section or anything. I just clicked it, I purchased it, and it was done, and I got them.
So will you take offense to the claim that Beyonce is overrated?
I refuse to engage in that. I just refuse.
You're just not even gonna try and debate.
No, I mean, you have your opinions. People have their opinions. I have my own, and I'm I will gladly spend $358 to see Beyonce. So.
Well, I think in the approach that you have to music in terms of like discovering and like trying new artists and stuff, is that at all sort of analogous to how you feel you've approached your career? Maybe not like right now, but like certainly for the past decade, you've been discovering and trying new things. And maybe can you tell us a little bit about your career path? Because I think that's the what we want to spend a lot of the time on today is learning about that. And for people who might think like me, anyone who knows me knows that I've been working for the same employer for over fucking a decade now. And a lot of friends that know me, they're like, David, get the hell out of there. Not because there's anything wrong per se, but it's just like the world is your oyster. Like, try something new. But I am so scared of like leaving that comfort zone, leaving those golden handcuffs, if you will, of that public sector sort of employer with my pension plan and my 6-7 weeks of vacation. But you certainly haven't shied away from that. So did I miss anything earlier when I mentioned some of your greatest hits?
You missed a couple of things, but I think, it doesn't really matter too much. If I think about my career path, I think I can probably start with like my first kind of real job. And like that story kind of covers the theme of my life for the past 5 years. My first job, like post undergrad, you kind of mentioned this, was a political leadership campaign. I pursued that because I thought, this person's vision was really compelling. And funny enough, I had actually been applying to jobs in Toronto, just a bunch of random like policy jobs, because that's kind of what I studied. But I just never heard back. So I thought like, why not give this a go? So I committed to that for, longer than I probably should have, because I came out of it really depressed and like bedridden for like 3 months. And I think anyone that's worked in politics, or like even if you've seen a political drama on like Netflix or something, you'll know how soul sucking and toxic that type of work can be. For me, like I was a bit naive getting into it. I was just really, really passionate and excited.
You had that Obama hope. Yes, we can.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, very much so. But once I kind of realized what it was or what was actually going on, it felt like it was too late. I felt too attached to the outcome or to what I had started or the reason that I joined. So like I wanted to see it through, and I did see it through. But there was so much more work to do to sort of keep the momentum of our success going. And there was like great promise in continuing had I just shut up and followed direction. But I am someone like who cannot do anything that I don't agree with or that doesn't excite me anymore. And there was a lot I just didn't agree with. So I tried to voice that, but I didn't really feel like it was well received. So at that time, like I had to make what was a pretty like heartbreaking decision for me, just to walk away. And that's sort of been the big theme career-wise for me for the last 5 years. Like if I'm not feeling it anymore, if I'm not into it, if it doesn't feel right, like I just have to walk away and look for something better.
So you walk away when the feeling's not right. Do you want to elaborate on that at all in terms of like, because a lot of people struggle with knowing when it's the right time to take the risk and the leap of faith to quit and try something new, especially when you quit, for example, is there something waiting for you that is another steady financial job?
So with that campaign, I hadn't been searching for anything else. Like, again, anybody that's worked in politics too knows that the pay is absolute shit. So I wasn't really making much money at all, but I was just extremely enthusiastic and passionate, and I just kind of made it work. I put everything, all of me, blood, sweat, and tears into that, and there was no backup plan. I was absolutely committed to seeing it through until I got to a point where it just kind of broke me. I felt like I had completely lost the essence of who I was, and so I just had to pull out, and I can't quite articulate what I was feeling at the time. It's something more in my body that like my body would not allow me to take one step further. And so it was a debilitating experience in many ways. And I just had to kind of listen to that and get in tune with my body. And I quit. And that's why like I was in bed quite literally like for like 3 months afterwards, because I had no ability or motivation or drive to actually step into the world. So long story short, and probably TMI, but like I didn't have a backup plan. I didn't have another job lined up. I just had to exist for a while. And, after a while of like not working, you need work, you need finances to kind of continue going on in life. So I had just started to applying jobs. I really had no motivation or desire. I didn't really know what I was looking for, but it was more so about ease and what was accessible and what could I easily make happen. I applied to this, job in Victoria. It was a fine job, but like I was working as a legislative assistant, and it wasn't political at all, but it was like the boring side of government, like drafting proclamations and orders in council and like other legislative documents. And I just pursued that because I knew I had the background and experience to land the job, and I did land the job.
Right, right. I was going to ask about that, and I think you just answered my question here. But like for a lot of people, there's a antagonistic relationship between trying to find work that you're qualified for versus trying to find work that you just truly want to do. And if you're lucky, I think those two will coincide. But oftentimes, it's an imperfect marriage of those two factors. And I think for most people, you have to sort of default to finding what you are qualified for, even if it's not necessarily your dream job, or it doesn't have to be your dream job, but like even if it's not necessarily something you want to do for the next 10 years. So for you in that moment, after not working for few months, in terms of how you decided what to apply for, you just looked at your resume, you looked at your experience, like, okay, what is my skill set? What is my education? Where were my internships before? What job can I get with this experience? Not so much like, what's going to ignite my soul and spirit?
No, not at that time.
So how did that work then? Was it better than you expected? Was it exactly what you expected? And I guess ultimately, why did you leave that job too?
I think that job was exactly what I expected it to be. I think working in government is working in government. You know,
what does that mean? Because a lot of people who are listening don't have any idea about government or what that even looks like.
I feel I just want to say that like everything you hear about working in government is true. It's mundane, it's boring, it's slow, it's lacking innovation, it's unchallenging, it's draining, it's just a complete bore. At least
we should have G on just for this segment because she works for the government.
My bad. Sorry, G. Look, listen, I know that it varies across departments, right?
That's a perfectly valid opinion, right? Because like when it comes to this stuff, one person's love could be another person. Like, you know, you love R&B soul concert music. It doesn't make one right or wrong. So I think, you know, lean into it. It's fine. So ultimately, what led you to leave that job too?
Right. I think I needed to be out in the world and be able to kind of receive my motivation or let it land or let it come to me and let it find me. And by being in bed all day, going broke or by the second, like that wasn't going to happen. So I had to get myself out of the house and into a new environment to sort of open myself up to receive that. And then while I was there, I would get, you know, access to like internal job postings all the time. And I was kind of looking at those and I would see the type of jobs like, you know, that would interest me or like that I would want to go for. But at that time I knew like I was missing that credential, right? Like usually like I was into like policy analysis at that time. And you can land a job in policy without a master's degree, but a master's degree like definitely makes it a lot easier to get. So I knew that had to be the next move. I can say this now. At the time, like I didn't really know like how depressed I really was, but I was very much depressed, and I went into that program just knowing that like I need to get in and out. I need that credential, and I'm out.
Can I ask, because you've mentioned it once or twice here, so I assume it's okay to at least touch upon. You're struggling a little bit emotionally yourself, mental health wise during that time in your life. You've at some point started to seek professional help with that. Can I? And when did that start for you? Was it before or after the masters?
It was during the masters, actually.
The reason I want to touch upon this is because I am such a big. I know so many people like you and my sister, right, who have benefited so much from it, and I think to this day there's still some stigma around it.
Definitely.
So anytime I can share a positive story about it, I want to, and that's why I'm asking. So did that help you like right away, or did it not? Like, did it take some time before it really helped?
Well, it definitely took some time, and so you said we were at Black and Blue in like November 2018. So I think that's when you and I had that conversation about depression a little bit more in depth. And I think you had encouraged me to like see a psychiatrist or see someone. And I thought, you know, David, like you're right, like shit is pretty bad. What I remember feeling at that time was just being unable to function. Like I couldn't get my work done. And that was the main cause. I wasn't really thinking about mental health or how I was feeling or, you know, emotions, none of that. It was just like, oh, I can't do the shit that I need to do. And so I think that is when I went and saw a psychiatrist. with the goal of like getting some medication to like put me back in tune, just so I could get through this program. And that's very much like the attitude I went in, saying like, hey, like I'm not able to function at work. I'm not able to function at school. I need to get through this program. Life's really hard. Very quickly, like she prescribed me these antidepressants and I took them, and it was kind of a secret because like nobody in my family like really talks about mental health, or in my friend circle, like it wasn't really a thing. So I kind of just, they start you off on the lowest dose. I took that. I felt kind of an instant like, oh, like I'm feeling better. Like I feel more alert. This is nice. And that only lasted for so long. I had to continue going back and like upping the dose to a point where like I maxed it out. And so that in itself was a very like defeating experience. I kind of felt like, I was carrying this like thought with me, like, what's wrong with me? Like, why aren't I normal? Like, why can't I do this? Why is it so easy for the rest of my cohort to just hand in this assignment when I had to hand in a bullet point form essay just because I literally had no capacity to draft together sentences? And so for me, I got to a point where I was kind of like, fuck this. Am I allowed to swear?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So I got to a point where I was like, fuck this. It's not working, or it's not doing what I needed to do. And I think although the antidepressants kind of helped with me being a little bit more alert and more focused, I felt completely numb in life. I had really no feeling or desire or like want to like really participate in life. So I just decided one day that I was going to, get off of them, like cold turkey. Like I was over it. This is just not working for me. Let me try like counseling or something. And I got paired with like 2 different counselors. Like the one was really good, but it was just like somebody that you call on like an emergency basis. And like she just happened to answer, and I talked to her and she was great. And the person that I started seeing regularly, she wasn't very good at the job. So I'm like, okay, like I feel like I am smarter than you and I know more than you and I can handle this on my own. Goodbye. And so I kind of just, fucked off from that again for a while. And I think it was really like closer to like when I was finishing my master's program that I felt like, this deep sense of like emptiness. And I was finally in a place where I had some time to like actually think about what I might be missing or what I might be wanting. And I decided like I was going to give therapy like a genuine go. So it took me a little while to like find a therapist that worked for me. But when I did, it was probably the best thing that could ever happen to me.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad that you found someone that works and that it's been certainly not a linear path after that, but I'm sure that it has been a huge help for you to move on and live the life that you want. The conversation today, the larger conversation about career and changing jobs, when we were brainstorming what we would want to talk about, you came up with this phrase, which is that your life, career-wise especially, has been sort of almost like a quote-unquote radical pursuit of joy.
Yeah.
And if you think about the word joy, that's a huge juxtaposition to depression.
Yeah.
And so mental health is almost very hand in hand with your career choices, because if you're not happy with your career, chances are you're not happy with your life, because your job is the majority of the time that you spend with your life.
Yeah, with the career and happiness sort of going hand in hand, I agree to that I agree to it to an extent. If I think about my journey personally and what I've been through as like child Preet to like teen Preet to adult Preet, I think I overemphasized my career, or I sought joy and fulfillment from my career because it's the only place where I thought I could get it. And, I don't want to like share my whole like story, but basically growing up, I didn't get a lot of validation or a lot of attention or I didn't really feel seen growing up. And the first time I did feel seen was really through work. And that's where I felt valued and like I was actually making a contribution and that, people valued me. So I think a taste of that sort of validation and positive attention was really addicting for me and was so new and so exciting for me. I hadn't really felt that in my life before. So it just, I think there was something that happened in my brain where I connected my career with the joy and happiness that I had been seeking for most of my life at that point. And so that kind of led me to this chaotic journey of like, oh, wait, this actually, I'm 3 months in and I'm not happier. What's going on? I have to find the next best thing. And so that kind of formed my motivation to keep going and keep searching within the career space. And we can talk a little bit more about this, but like to sum it up, I had to step outside of that space to recognize what joy and happiness really meant for me.
I love that you were able to understand that about yourself.
It's taken some time.
I feel like that's very, very profound in a very authentic and sincere and personal way. And I'm very happy for you that you have come to this understanding of yourself. That's such an interesting point. Like I come in here wanting to know about your career and like you're like this badass bitch, you know, your resume is just employers are lining up for it. It's like this evolution where you go from being really good at getting jobs that you want, and then the final step and then transcend this ultimately is to like not even need the career.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a, I don't know what the word is, but it's a very liberating and transformative revelation for you. And maybe that's not the case for everyone. Maybe some people have a healthy relationship finding joy in their work, but that hasn't worked for you. So tell me more about that final step, about realizing that you were trying to seek joy in the work. What are the next steps you took to make that relationship more healthy for you?
I guess it was, I think like the summer of 2021. Within that year alone, or within the past 6 months, I had already switched 2 jobs. So I was doing something in the fall of 2020. And then I was like, not for me within like 2 months, moved on to something bigger and better, like February 2021. And then I was like, actually, like this is not really fitting. And that's when I felt like the most chaotic and crazy, because it was just like, I remember like, you know, having like lunch with you or another friend and just saying like, oh, by the way, like I'm doing this now. And it was kind of like, what? Like you just started this and you were so excited, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I remember that so much. Like, it's like you could not hold down a job. And I'm not here to judge, obviously, but certainly there's a part of me, it's not judging, it's part of me is like,
what's going on?
What's going on?
Truly.
These are good jobs. Yeah, you were working at like a think tank, a policy think tank, where it's the nirvana for any policy aficionados and career people.
Yeah.
You were there. You were at the Mount Everest of policy work, and you're like, I'm leaving. I'm like, wait, what? What are you doing?
Yeah, that's what I was getting to. Like that was what I was doing in like the summer of 2021. You know, I remember like telling you these things like, David, like I've made it, like this was the dream, like this is what I wanted, or at least, you know, at the time it's what I thought I wanted. Working on this incredible research project, I wasn't meant to be in charge, but like, I don't know, the team had kind of fell apart. And so I was all of a sudden like in charge of the project, or like the lead researcher on the project and the project manager at the same time. And, you know, it wasn't really what I signed up for, but to a regular person, I think they would just take advantage of the moment, because not only was it a great opportunity, like for the resume, it was the highest paying job for me. I was making really great money, and I probably won't see that type of money again for at least another like 4 or 5 years into my career at this point. But there was like, my body gave up, there was some sort of rebellion, and it's kind of like twofold. For one, I wasn't prepared for all that they were asking of me, and I didn't have really the skill or the words or the know-how to articulate or express that, hey, what you're asking for me is unreasonable. When they gave me like something to do, and it was a wild set of expectations that was completely out of touch, I didn't know that I could say that to them, or like express that, like, hey, you know, you've selected me as your lead, like based on my opinion, this is not doable within this time frame, blah, blah, blah. I just didn't have like the confidence or the capacity to even think that far about saying that, but also, yeah, like the confidence to actually articulate that. So I became like really, really stressed with all these expectations. And I remember like texting you like this huge paragraph, like, David, like, it's not working. I can't do it. I'm going to quit. I can't give notice. I have to quit. Like, I'm just sending the email right now. This is the email. And that's what I did. And that's like, I quit.
Do you think you burned the bridge there?
Yes. Yeah. And so I had a lot of regret in how that kind of unfolded.
Well, I asked that because a lot of times people in similar positions will not do that because they want to manage that bridge more for potential future things. It seems like time and time again, you're just doing the thing that a lot of people want to do, but don't have the courage to do. Like for me, I have a comfortable, good paying job and it's not my favorite thing to do in the world, but I'm like, well, it's good money. I can't walk away from this. Oh, Preet walked away from it. Walk away from good money.
I like framing it as courageous because it, sounds better, and I can feel,
it is
a little proud of myself that way. But at the time, like, that wasn't my frame of mind, that I'm acting in courage, or I'm acting boldly, or I'm doing something I'm like sticking to my convictions. In past jobs, sure, like that was definitely the case. But with this one in particular, it was almost like this gross desperation and disgust and inability. Like, what matters more, like being able to speak a sentence, or like write a sentence, or like exist in the world, or try to finish this research project?
If I might ask, so I think you have a very, unfortunately, so I suppose, a very intimate and personal relationship and experience with depression and everything that comes with that. But on the other side of that is joy. And as I said, we're calling this conversation Your Radical Pursuits of Joy. Yeah. So what is joy for you?
Joy for me, after all of these years and this like search for it, I think joy for me is kind of simple. And it's really about participating in life, actively participating in life. And for many years, I wasn't doing that. So I've been consciously on this pursuit for like the past 3 years. And like I mentioned earlier, like 3 years ago is actually when I started therapy, which in a sense felt radical in itself. Like nobody around me, not my family nor my friends, had ever gone to therapy or even talked about mental health really. And so, I think in that first or second session with my therapist, I told her that I wanted to feel joy. I told her about this Party Next Door song that I would constantly listen to. It's called Joy. And he basically goes, I want to feel joy. Like, let me be it. Let me see it. Let me find my joy, as if he's like pleading for it. And so, through therapy and just through life in general, I've really had to force myself to like step into this more honest and vulnerable place to explore what joy really looks like for me. And long story short, it's really the reason why I'm in Toronto now.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about that. Oh my gosh. Do you want to, so the context here is that Preet has born and raised in Vancouver?
Yeah, sorry.
Were you born? Sorry, yeah, the Greater Vancouver. And you've always gone to Toronto for like concerts, for temporary stints, and you always love, let's put it this way. I know you've always wanted to leave. You're like, just not, every time we meet up, you're like, this is not it. I'm not feeling it. Like, fuck this place. Why? Because Vancouver, a lot of people love Vancouver. And again, there's no right or wrong opinion. It's just an opinion, right? So I'm just why have you always wanted to leave Vancouver? I mean, speaking of courage earlier, like I think one of the most courageous things that you've ever done is move to Toronto. And maybe listeners will not really understand why, but maybe you can unpack that for us. So why do you want to leave Vancouver, and why was it such a courageous move for you?
Vancouver, I never really felt at home. I think it's a boring city. Again, my opinion. Like, even if you're living in the heart of downtown, which is a fucking ghost town, it's because you want to be able to like bike the seawall every day, or like drive up to Mount Seymour and go snowboarding. And yeah, like the nature of the mountains, all of that is stunning. And, Toronto does not compare in that respect, like 0 out of 10 for Toronto. But like, that's just not my lifestyle and not what I like to do. And Toronto has more of what I like to do. So like the arts, culture, music, and just a vibrant like city life and genuine diversity versus like segregation that you see all over Vancouver. But the reason like it took me so long to make this move was really because of fear. I've known since 2016 that like Toronto was where I wanted to be. But, there's the general fears of like committing to like, or like the logistical fears of like making this move and relocating, questions like, what if it doesn't work out? What if I end up hating it? Like, what if I can't afford it? Oh my God, what if I get evicted? What if I lose my job? All of that was very alive and well for me every day for like probably like at least every day for like all those years since 2016. I'm not very good at math, but I think that's like 5-ish years. But there's two like heavier and I think more debilitating fears that I had. And the first one was around like family and like cultural expectations. In South Asian households, like you do not move out of your parents' house, especially if you're a girl. There's only one acceptable reason for moving out, and that's marriage. And sometimes you can finesse a move, like an acceptable move, like for your career. Like I'd done that in the past for like co-op jobs. I went to like Ottawa and Calgary, but with that, it was always like, oh, like mom, dad, it's just 4 months. Like, this is what's going to help me get a job after graduation. You know how like competitive the market is. Like, don't worry, BRB. But this time like was different, right? Because there was no like crutch for me to say like, oh, I had this amazing job opportunity waiting for me. So having to tell my parents that, hey, mom and dad, I'm unhappy and I think Toronto might make me happier. Like I knew that wasn't going to land well. Right. So that was like one of the major fears that I had. And then the second one kind of linked, but more so like linked to my own self-worth. So a majority of my life, I would say I lived it like pretty passively, very accommodating of my family, accommodating of my friends, not really letting me be me or like just being afraid to step into me and be seen. So making a move like this, it required me to be bold and loud and visible and to be able to express like my wants and desires. And it has taken years of therapy for me to sort of get there. As I grappled with the fear like of making this decision, knowing full well this whole time since 2016 that it was exactly what I needed to do, my therapist would always ask me like, Preet, like how good can you take it? And I was afraid that I didn't deserve for life to be this good. And, I made a trip to Toronto in October last year and I had such a lovely time, as I always do, this. I think you just reach a point of like being so unhappy that you're like disgusted with yourself and disgusted by that emotion. And you want to like just get rid of it. And I knew like at that time, like when I was there, I was here like for 4 days, maybe 3.5. I just had a moment with myself, like, like, what feels good for you. And you've been ignoring that or fighting that for all these years. But like, how much longer? Like at that moment, I felt like I couldn't even take a day longer. And I just decided it had to be now. So, that was in October. And 3 months later, I was in Toronto.
That resonates with me quite a lot, to be honest, because I am often disgusted with myself. As in, like, I'm sick of the shit. I'm sick of not on Vancouver. For me, what I'm sick of is my lack of discipline that gets in the way of living the best life I know I can and want to live.
Yeah.
And that thing that you mentioned, it resonates. That phrase, that sentence, that feeling that you articulated, like where you're asking yourself, when is this too much? As in, when is this going to stop? How much longer are you going to put up with this shit? And for me, it's like, how much longer are you going to put up with this state? But like, when are you going to do something about it? Because you can, what it is. And for me, it's, not being addicted to social media. It's not sleeping late. It's getting up early. It's getting the exercise I want. And for you, it's moving to Toronto. I think for all of us, in order to live our best selves, our best lives, sometimes it often does require us to get to that point where you're like, I've had enough. Enough is enough. I'm going to start living the life that I know I want. No excuses.
Yeah.
But I think it often takes that breaking point but you're past that now. So I honestly, I'm so happy for you. I'm so proud of
Thank you.
That cultural part, obviously, we could potentially spend an hour talking about that on its own. But I think everyone comes from a family. Everyone has cultural influences, and I think that part is super relatable for sure. So, in a nutshell, like how has it been for you over there? How long have you been there now? A few months?
I think it's just hitting 3 months.
Just 3 months. Do you have a bed yet? Like
I don't. Like my mattress is still on the floor. I've honestly, been really busy, and for me,
in a good way,
in a good way, for the most part.
Okay.
For me, like part of this like pursuit of joy, like I am somebody, I don't want to get anything that doesn't bring me joy. So like that like applies to material things and like the way that I'm like decorating my space. And so I haven't had the time to like look into all the like it just sucks because I'm just like an overthinker and I'm a researcher. So I want to be able to like find the best that I can for the price and budget that I have. So I haven't been able to get a bed because for one, I haven't put the time into thinking about like what type of bed I want. And then two, like I just don't want to like waste money on some random shit that doesn't feel remarkable. So there's that. But
that actually reminds me of a TED talk, or just when it was a talk at Google that I listened to the other day by a guy called Ramit Sethi.
Yeah.
Sethi. And he wrote a book as well. And both the talk and the book is titled "I Will Teach You to Be Rich." I think is something like along those lines. And I really love this talk. And I think the book talks about the same thing too. And the reason why his message resonates with a lot of people is because everyone talks about how to save money, right? To get rich and to be wealthy. And he's like, no one talks about how to spend better. And I think one of his main messages that sticks with me is this idea of ask yourself, what kind of spending and expenditure brings you the most joy? What money do you spend that gives you the most joy? And to encourage you to lean into that, to be unapologetic about that. And I think I mention this because I think you're actually doing that really well. You're not just, oh, I need a bed, let me just buy a bed. You're like, no, fuck no. I'm going to buy a bed that gives me joy. And if it doesn't give me joy, like I'm not. And then you're like, I'm going to go to this concert. Beyonce gives me joy. It doesn't matter that's $350. This gives me joy. But then on other things that don't give you joy, you're not going to be spending money on it. Some people will be like, well, you need a bed, Preet. You need a bed. Like, what kind of adult sleep? And you're like, no, screw it. I'm not going to spend money that doesn't give me joy.
I think money is really important. I think my parents really ingrained that into me. I saw them work hard they're continuing to work hard every single day of their life. And to live the life that I want to live in this economy, just requires a solid set of finances and, being here, making this move, living in this incredibly expensive city. Like I've had to make adjustments to some of my expectations and that hasn't been fun, but I am perfectly okay with waiting it out or building a budget to make my dream bed work. Yeah. So absolutely that resonates with me.
So after all this time and all these ups and downs and trial and errors, and I think one thing for sure that I know about you, Preet, is that you will never settle for mediocrity. Like mediocrity, in all forms is like oil and water. And I love that about you. It's like no settling. Like fuck no. I did, and I think in a way I'm surprised to hear what you said earlier about how it's not been easy for you to step into the spotlight and go after what you want. And you're very accommodating because you have always been someone who will not accept less than what you want.
Yeah, it's an interesting observation and it's something that I've thought about a whole lot. And I think I want to say, or like, shout out to you. Because with you, I have always felt that I could just show up authentically. And you have seen me through the changes from like that super career oriented era to like me being in my soft girl era now and all that's happened in between. I have really felt safe and comfortable just to show up as me. And you are somebody I met when I had just left home for the first time and had come back. You were the first person in my life, like I don't mean to get all corny right now, but to ask me what my hobbies and interests were. And so it sounds so like, dramatic, but like in your own way, it kind of altered my brain chemistry to, you introduced me to like what type of friendships or people that I can have in my life, and made me realize that like what I had been accepting in the past maybe wasn't actually good enough for me. And so part of like this healing journey that I've been on for the past however many years, like 2 years ago, I had to legitimately reintroduce myself to my closest friends who I've been friends with like for over a decade, to say, hey, as of like today, like I'm showing up authentically as me, and like we're going to see if this works, because for the past however many years, like, you know, I am who I am. I've always been true to me to some extent, but in terms of vulnerability and comfort and safety, it hasn't always been there in many of my friendships, and I don't blame them for it. It's also how I have shown up to them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like sitting down with my closest friends and saying like, hello, my name is Preet and this is who I am. Like, it's awkward. It's weird. It's like, girl, like, get over yourself. But like, I had to do it. And those friendships now too, like are stronger than they ever have been. So.
Well, I'm so happy that you have found the courage or the vulnerability to show up as your authentic self to more people. I'm very humbled and grateful that I was able to provide you that space. But yeah, you're walking into your true self, and I know that sounds corny, but
I'm embracing corny.
I mean, honestly, that's what 30s is. A lot. It is, right? Like 20s is when you start realizing, oh shit, like I need to walk to the rhythm of my beat. But it takes time, and I think 30s is when you finally start walking along your own path. Like, I so appreciate your vulnerability. I think a lot of things that you mentioned to have it shared on a public platform is not easy, but this is the real shit, right? Like, and it's not just you. You're not, like, I hope you know this, right? Like, you're obviously not alone in this. And I think why I wanted to have you share your story is because I'm kind of vicariously living through you, because a lot of people like myself do not have the courage to demand better for themselves. I'm like, oh, I'm in this job. It's it's not the worst thing. It's just it's not the perfect job, but like, you know, it pays good and it's comfortable. So, you know, I'm grateful for. I'm very happy about it. But like, is it possible that I may have a happier life if I tried something new? It is possible, but it brings me to this quote that Tim Ferriss in his book 4 Hour Workweek, he mentions, quote, people will choose unhappiness over uncertainty. And I think that from your story, you've done that a few times.
Yeah.
But what makes your story, I think, inspiring for people like me and maybe others is that you did choose uncertainty over unhappiness. And I think that makes you unique. I think a lot of people don't do that. Like going to Toronto. And as you said earlier, you didn't have a job lined up when you made that decision. That's fucking terrifying.
It was absolutely terrifying.
But as you said, I think like you did that in that point because you were at a breaking point. It's terrifying, but like, what is more terrifying? What is more terrifying for you at that point was staying in Vancouver, keeping the status quo. That's when we make life changes, is when whatever else that we want to do is terrifying, yes, but it's when we find the current status quo even more freaking terrifying. That's when we're like, okay, yeah, that thing is scary, but what's more scary is dying in my bed.
Exactly.
Right
here. Absolutely. Man. Like, I never really thought about it of like in that frame, like of me choosing uncertainty every time, but I guess I was. And like, I've always been kind of driven more by, I don't know, like something greater, kind of knowing my purpose, finding my purpose. And I knew like home wasn't that for me. And, you know, over the years, like I wouldn't even commit to buying certain things or painting the wall or like fixing the screw or something. Cause it was always temporary for me. And I was in that mindset. And so for me, like, I didn't want to continue living like that. It was miserable. I felt like I wasn't really establishing any roots anywhere. I was just kind of floating and existing in the world with no real grounding.
Kudos to you to make the move. And more importantly, it's not like, oh, what's the job now, right? The more important thing is like, hey, you have found a healthier relationship with your job, with your career, and what that means to you. not letting that single-handedly define your self-worth and not single-handedly be the sole source of validation. Hopefully you're finding that elsewhere now as well. Just to end off, like, is there something that you're doing now, maybe not on a daily basis, but like just generally, what's part of your life now that you're doing that you've found has really helped you stay on a better track and feel better about yourself? I know you go on like walks, for example.
Walking is a big one. I try to go walk, like I'm pretty close to the lake, so I just go walk for like an hour at least every day when I can. But for me, for so long, I not really was like, I was going to say I was in hiding, but like I was kind of like living like a recluse. Like I was just in my room all the time because I didn't really have the desire to engage in the world. And so for me, the biggest like game changer, like for being here, I step outside, and that has, I don't know, transformed my whole world. Like I'll walk like outside my lobby or something, like, you know, and I find inspiration in the grass or a stone or a building or the architecture or like a butterfly or a stupid, there's these nasty ass flies out here. Anyways, those are annoying. They don't give me inspiration, but they kind of motivate me to like seek out other places because like they're all like around the lake. So like now I'm exploring different neighborhoods. I've always been a very curious person, and I am now in a place where I can feed that curiosity every single day with minimal effort. And
because you live in the city.
In this city. Yeah.
Oh,
in the city.
yeah.
Like, I don't know. It just has what I need. And who knows, like maybe it's not forever. Like maybe there's other cities out there that I'll like better, but like this is great for now.
If anyone wants to learn more about you, connect with you, or just like, do you have an online presence that you want to share or plug?
I'm just a regular like Instagram user, passive scroller, but like if somebody out there wants to, you know, be my friend or talk to me, it's it's P on Instagram. You can
P and the letter P.
Yeah, and as in YEAH.
I love that. It's such a good handle, honestly. It's much better than you and David.
Yeah, it's kind of boring. Remember, mediocrity is not for me. Just kidding.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
Even as your close friend, like I found this conversation, like hearing your story, so moving and so touching and so inspirational.
Thank you.
And so insightful. I don't even know if I necessarily learned too many specific new things, but just in the way that you framed everything and the narrative that you weaved, I think you have a lot to be proud of, and I hope you are.
I am. Thank you.
And this action you're taking to step into your authentic self, to go after what you want. Yeah, I think this is definitely going to move you in the right direction. And I hope nothing but the best. But, you know, having said that, there's gonna be like shitty weeks and months ahead.
Yeah,
you know? Like that's
2 weeks ago.
So I don't want to say this, and I don't want to say this, and like, for example, if you suddenly have a down phase, be like, oh shit, it's not good. I think it's like the other day I don't watch basketball, but I saw this clip of an interview. I can't remember who it was, but it was it's a player on a team that didn't make the playoffs or something, and then a reporter asked that player, do you think this season was a failure? He's like, Michael Jordan made the finals and championships like X amount of times. And there was also X amount of times he didn't. So do you think those seasons that he didn't make the playoffs were a failure? And I think that's such a great response, because there are times where we're not succeeding, quote unquote, succeeding at the height of our potential, doesn't mean we're not putting in the work.
Yeah.
Like championships are made in the days when you're practicing and you're showing up and you're bouncing back. And I just want to mention that because like, as much as I wish, you know, nothing but like amazing days ahead for you, I want you to remember, and for all of us to remember, that like when there are setbacks, like they're not really setbacks, right? They're just another step in our journey. And I know, again, very fucking cliche, but just very true. I don't know. I think that's something that we have to remember. Like just because you're going up now doesn't mean that it can't go down. And if it does go down, doesn't mean that it won't go up again. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. And I just have to say that was a really great like close, a great way. I think people need to hear that life has, I mean, we all know that life has its ups and downs, but to keep that bigger picture sort of frame in mind is really comforting, I think.
Yeah.
So.
And if suddenly all the millennials in BC, if they see a trend that there has been a spike in people quitting their jobs, not our fault. we assume no responsibility for that.
Nope.
Okay, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Bye.
Bye.
I really hope you all enjoyed today's conversation. If you did, it is always appreciated if you could take a moment to share our podcast with your friends, follow us on whichever podcast platform you're using, perhaps give us a rating on Spotify, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, and hope you have a wonderful week ahead.